Welcome. So Trevor Lorkings is known as the digital alchemist, and he was born to be creative and has a passion to help entrepreneurs get the most out of their marketing presence with attention-grabbing visual media. Trevor masters in graphic design, website design, video production, motion graphics, and is a podcaster. So after spending 20 years in a career of purchasing, Trevor abandoned the corporate world to start his own design agency and a number of e-commerce websites, and are now run by the family business. Trevor is not only my personal go-to with digital creativity, but he also is a dear friend from across the pond from England and has much wisdom in creation. So without further ado, welcome, Trevor. It is so amazing to have you here today. It's an honor.
Thank you for inviting me on the show, Lily. It's a real pleasure to be here. So,
thank you. So, you know, it's interesting how your passion to help entrepreneurs kind of led you into this path of your own entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So, what was the turning point for you, where you really decided to hang up your cap, so to speak, and start your own design agency, your own agency?
I think it was when I look back, sort of two pivotal points, really. If you go back before I started the purchasing career at school, I was sort of gifted in mathematics, and I was obsessed with mathematics and science and physics and that kind of thing. But I got to 16, 17 years old, and I just come to a roadblock with education. And I was like, I've had enough of this learning stuff. I want to go and live. I actually turned down 5 offers to go to university and didn't go to university when I was 18. And it was just a big change of direction. And I think the same happened. I'd spent 20 years in kind of corporate world, spending lots of money, which sounds great, doesn't it? Spending money for a living. But I kind of run out of steam. It was kind of like, this is just going nowhere. I'm just doing the same old thing day in, day out. And even though I progressed through the career to different job levels, they're just labels. You know, you still get up in the morning, you drive to work, cycle to work, walk to work, whatever. You sit in a desk and you do stuff for someone else. And it wasn't fulfilling me anymore. And it was around about the turn of the century. Whether that's significant in any mystical astrological meanings, I don't know. But it was the new century begun. And I discovered this thing called Qi, which I know we've spoken about a few times. Yeah. And having done Reiki and Tai Chi together, in a very short space of time, probably a few years, my whole world, again, significantly changed. My outlook on life changed greatly. And I think that was the shift from, why am I doing this every day of the week just to get a paycheck? It wasn't fulfilling. It was just something to do. I could kind of do it with my eyes shut, because I've got it. After 20 years, you've got the hang of what you're doing. But it didn't actually fulfill what I was doing. It didn't give that excitement in life anymore. And this Qi and Reiki thing sort of turned and threw a curveball into my life. And it was like, there's this whole new world I can explore. Let's try and do something different. And the creativity was something that came out of that I'd always had bubbling away in the background, but never used it so much in my job in like the design creativity, that kind of thing. And just lots of stars collided all together, and bang, yeah, let's start my own business was what happened. And luckily it worked quite well, because about a year or two later, the company I was working for went out of business. So
oh no.
Wow. Yeah, so it all worked well.
It's interesting how when there's a different feeling in creativeness, when it's something that you're doing from more of a personal, maybe a personal reason or intent, as opposed to being an employee and kind of going through the motions, right? And like you were saying, just labels and every day, same thing, day in and day out. So there's huge difference, isn't there? When you're really doing something, you know, where you're really serving your passion. It's not that you weren't passionate, what I'm hearing you say, about what you were doing.
Yeah.
But when you're really, really using that passion to really serve others, I think is really where that creative outlet kind of took off.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, even in my purchasing job that I had, part of it was buying design and print services. You know, that was part of what I did. And
Mm,
even in that, I was very restricted in I couldn't design things that I wanted to design and be creative. I want to be creative. It was all sort of tied up in the corporate world, and that's what you had to have. That was a design. Just buy it, you know. And I'm like, well, I could improve that. I could make it better. Have you thought of this? And there was, you know, I was always an ideas person, but the corporate machine didn't want ideas. It just wanted people to do stuff and get through doing stuff. They didn't want to be creative and have different ideas, because different ideas sort of through the whole plans of the business, you know. And it wasn't, you know, back in the day, it wasn't the done thing. You know, it was a different world back then.
yeah,
Well, yeah. Whereas working for yourself, you are kind of, I would say, nearly 100% in control. Clearly, you have clients to serve, and you have to work with their needs and demands. But it's a whole load of creativity you can put at that and throw it in their direction and go, these are my great ideas I've got on your brand or your design or your website or whatever it is. And generally, hopefully, they come back with, wow, that's an amazing idea. I hadn't thought of that. Or wow, I love what you've done there. And the
mm,
wow factors keep coming back all the time, which is something I didn't get in the corporate world. You know?
right.
Mm,
Yeah. You know, speaking of creativity, you and I have personally had quite a few chats on creation,
mm,
haven't we? In general, you
yeah.
know. And so one of my major approaches, as you know, that I use when I coach and in my writing and in my speaking, and you know, and I do this approach for myself, is really making that heart mind intuition connection.
Hmm.
So tell me about what you feel is the difference between the mind and the brain.
Aha, good question. Well, it's an interesting one. People say, "Joe, how are you so creative?" I say, well, to be creative, I just have creative thoughts. And they kind of, well, what do you mean you just have creative thoughts? I'm like, well, we're surrounded by thoughts. We live in a soup of thoughts. You know, we live in air and we take it for granted. But that air is full of possibility. And when you realize thoughts are actually all around everywhere and you can collect whichever thoughts you choose you want to collect, then if you want a creative thought, you just grab one
Mm.
and you bring it in through your mind into your physical shell that we have. And then on top of our physical shell inside our head, we have a brain, and the brain processes that and turns that into, if it's a good enough thought you've had, it will choose to turn it into some reality.
Mm.
And the brain is what takes the etheric world of thought, which we can't actually see, touch, or feel, but it brings that into our physical reality that we see in our sort of 3D visual field that we see and kind of things we hear. And then that's that three-dimensional thing that brings it in. You know, what else brings in that energy and creates what humans create?
Most of us think that the thoughts come from our in here, right? And so you and I
Yeah.
have this conversation, which I always find fascinating.
Yeah.
But most people, like, again, like, where do thoughts come from, right?
Well,
So
I would say to people, if you think your thoughts are inside your head already, and they've been there all the time ever since the day you were born, it kind of means that every thought you've ever had and every thought you're going to have in this incarnation was in your head at birth. So therefore, the things you're going to think about tomorrow are already there. Because if they are not in your head now, but they'll be in your head tomorrow, in your brain, when you get to tomorrow, if they're not there now, where are they to be there tomorrow? So if you think every thought, I mean, the scientists will tell you, I don't know how many thousand thoughts a day we have. They've managed to count them all. I don't know how you count a thought, but they've worked out how many thousand thoughts we have a day. And it's lots of them. You multiply that by many days you've lived at our kind of age, without giving away too much, you know, all those thoughts are at birth. We had them at birth and we've hung on to them all this time. So the things you're thinking about tomorrow, you've had for all those years of your life, if they're already in your head. I don't buy that concept, because otherwise your head would be huge, wouldn't it? I mean, you'd be like, where'd you put them all?
yeah, I mean, it's actually it's funny that you say that because most of us start, a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us start, you know, a sentence. Well, I
Mm,
think, well, I just
mm,
had a thought, right?
mm. Yeah.
And several years ago, when I was working with another coach who was actually a business she was a life coach, but business and life coach, somewhat like myself. But she had, she actually made an impact on me by taking away even those words, I think,
Hmm.
and starting to add like different vocabulary, which really works well. And
Hmm.
I'm wondering if her meaning behind that was the same reason that you're saying that the thoughts are kind of around here, right?
Yeah.
Um, so the term mindfulness
Hmm.
and even the methodology of mindfulness meditation is no doubt trending right now,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? Everything is mindfulness, mindfulness, mindfulness.
Mindsets. Get your mindset and all that. Yeah.
Mindset, mindfulness, mindful meditation, right? It's
Yep.
like the big thing. It's
Hmm.
trending. And you beg to differ, not with the concept of it. Instead, you suggest that it's really not coming from the mind, and you suggest, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Hmm.
that it be called brainfulness, which I find fascinating. Fascinating. It is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So tell me what is brainfulness?
The question is, what is mindfulness? You see, mindfulness it is a kind of a hip, trendy kind of word nowadays, isn't it? We all talk about mindfulness, and it's kind of thrown around, and I think not everybody sort of stops and thinks, what does it actually mean? We just get caught up in, oh, that's the thing to do. And I quickly looked before I came on to think, well, what is the definition of it? Because we all have a view of it. And I looked online on a few places, and I found a very popular app for meditating. And their definition of mindfulness and mindfulness meditation, they said, amongst some things, they said it's great for changing your mindset and the shape of your brain. So they're not distinguishing really between the mind and the brain. And this is what I see a lot of the time. Even neuroscientists write articles and they use the word brain and mind as interchangeable. And they
Yes.
don't, they will have all these scans of, you've seen brain scans, these pictures of this lump in your head and the pictures and little blips and things. And they'll physically scan the brain with all their technology, but then they'll talk about mind. And you know, well, are you scanning the mind or the brain? Which one are you scanning? What are you looking at? And they don't seem to differentiate.
Right.
And you thought, well, there must be a difference. Otherwise, we wouldn't have two words, would we? So mindfulness, generally, most people would expect it to be being present, focusing on this moment, probably a heightened state of awareness of this moment. And it's all focusing on now. And now is another hip word we all have to trend on. Now, the brain lives in a time-based reality. We're in a physical reality and we work by time. We're recording this podcast at a certain time, certain date. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking to each other at the same time, so people could actually get a recording of it and listen. So the brain works in a physical, time-based reality.
Mm-hmm.
The mind is timeless.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of merge those two together and work with the mind is timeless because it's infinite possibility of all time, whereas the brain is our physical computer that processes thoughts and lots of other things it's doing. So how can we talk about mindfulness when actually we're looking at what the brain is doing? If you want to be present and focused, the brain has to concentrate on being focusing here. So at the moment, my brain is focusing on talking to you on a recording of a podcast. My brain isn't thinking about, well, it will now because I'm going to talk about it, but my brain wasn't thinking about what am I going to have for tea tonight? What shall I have for breakfast tomorrow? What shall I do on Tuesday? Where should I go on holiday in August? My brain's not thinking that. My brain's thinking podcast. It's in the now-based time reality of now. So my brain is full of that focus. It's brainfulness. The brain is full.
Interesting. I,
Yeah.
I
And because the brain is full and focused on that, my mind is somewhere else and I'm not connected to it, if you like. My brain isn't going, what am I thinking about? My brain isn't doing that. My brain's focusing on the task in hand and it's sort of put the mind on hold for the moment. Probably hasn't disconnected it totally, but it's just ignoring it.
Mm.
And to me, it's a bit like your television set. Your television, you can probably get, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 500 TV channels. I don't know, quite a few. Yeah. We've probably got 100 or so TV channels on our TV. Now, I'm not sure about you, but I only watch one at a time.
I don't do much TV.
Yeah. But you can't watch 5 TV stations all at the same time.
No, although some people do.
Well, but if you've got one screen, you can generally you watch one at a time.
Yeah.
So the television is focusing on one program,
Mhm.
even though that television has the ability to receive 100, 200, 3, whatever, however, how many things you've subscribed to, but the television can receive a multitude of TV programs, but it's set to only tune into one at a time. Yeah. And that's the
Which
thing with the
is,
brain and the mind. The mind has the possibility to connect to infinite thought, but the brain, on the mindfulness word, which I now call brainfulness, is focusing on the moment of now and being aware of now, what it's doing and what it's up to. And it's disconnecting from all those other thousands and millions of infinite numbers of thoughts that it could collect. And that's brainfulness, not mindfulness. Does that make sense?
that makes total sense. And yeah, that's why I wanted, I wanted to discuss this. But we're hearing it here. This is my brain is right now thinking that this should be your brand, is brainfulness. No, but I mean, it makes complete sense.
Yeah. Well, I think on a similar analogy that people would think mindfulness, it's also this thought of the brain is kind of orderly and organized, rather than this chaos. And people say, "Oh, I can't meditate. I keep thinking too much. My brain's all chaotic. I can't. My mind's chaotic." Whichever, they don't know the difference.
Mm.
But if it's the concept of you're in order and you're focused, and the brain is actually all kind of aligned up, and there's not a great chaos and mess in there. So the brain actually is filling up in an orderly fashion to focus on what it needs to do. And that, for those people who still think of the mindfulness concept, is a similar kind of thing. It's filling up its purpose rather than just being this jumble of chaos. It's kind of getting ordered. But no, interesting. It's the brain doing the work. The brain is doing thinking. It's just processing thoughts. We call it thinking.
Does it also does the brain also, does that integrate then, or does that, because of what it's processing in the now, does that affect our feelings?
Well, it depends where you consider your feelings are processed.
Yes, true.
You see, because when you work out your brain has its mind to connect, to receive from external sources. And we always, people say, "Oh no, there's nothing out there." What do you mean? So I can see things out there. I can hear things out there. As I said the other day, I put out, when you read a book, do you hear the words in your head? Is there a voice in your head reading those words? And most people acknowledge, yeah, I hear a voice in my head reading the words of the book. And I said, well, when you close the book, where does the voice go? Yeah. Yeah. Because if the voice was in your head, that voice would still be in your head.
Right.
Just because you close the book, where's the voice? If the voice was already there, it's like where your thoughts have always been, always in your head. But no, the voice is coming from the book. That's what's creating the voice. Otherwise, the voice wouldn't be there, because you close the book, the voice disappears. The voice is in the book.
And what about when it comes to then, like any kind of current situation that kind of, gets thrown on, into our lives? Like I know that, like you recently had a personal, I don't know if I call it a challenge, but a personal issue where like your wife was diagnosed, right, with cancer, and she had treatments, and I believe she's now in remission, and like how did that play out for you with your understanding of on life and our current sudden changes and situations, changes from the norm?
It all happens. It's inputs, isn't it? It's all data inputs. And coming back to the feeling thing, we feel through the heart, not the brain. The brain doesn't feel anything. The brain processes data. Brain is very logical. I know there's people say there's left side and right side of brain. That's for another podcast. But the brain processes data and decides things. The heart feels things.
Yes.
And I always say, if you feel the heart is in control, then the brain is still in control. You have to let the heart decide to let the love flow. And the heart has that feeling, it's compassion, it's that love, it's a whole different mind connection. And similarly, back to when we have traumas in our life, certainly on the cancer side of things, on both Rosemary and myself, it was very much a case of, while the medical system may be able to affect the physical, if you don't let it affect the mental and the spiritual, you've still got that strength over the physical.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's
And it was very much mindset driven, that in the hospital, as a nurse talking to somebody else that was new to the first chemo treatment session, and the nurse says to the lady, just idle chit chat. Oh, you know, what's your job? What do you do? You know, what's happening? And then he said, oh, I'm whatever my job was. He says, but I've been signed off sick for 6 months. So her mind was in, I'm sick for 6 months. That was what was in her mind, feeding her physical body, brain, heart. Yeah.
yeah.
Our view of life was, we're not sick. This is just a physical process we need to get through because we're signed up to this system, through the medical system, but we're not sick, because it's not going to get to the mind and the spirit. And when you think we're mind, body, and spirit as a very common term, if you truly buy into that whole concept, that's how you can come across these physical problems that we face through life every day. And we're all facing physical problems through life every day. I don't know, you drive to work, you're stuck in traffic. Physically, your car cannot move to where you want your car to move to get down the road to drive to work. It's a physical thing.
Mm-hmm.
How you mentally respond to the thoughts around that can change the situation.
Yeah.
And if I go back to this is my best tongue twister, my Tai Chi teacher, say that carefully. I remember one day, and I still remember to this day, we were driving along, going to a Tai Chi class, funny enough, and there's a red traffic light, roadworks, temporary red traffic light. And we pull up, first car in the queue, and there's this red traffic light. And I'm like, oh, we're late. What's going to happen? I'm getting stressed because like we're running late anyway, and we're teaching the class, and the student's going to be there. We've got to open the door. And she just sat there and looked at this red light, and she says, what a beautiful shade of red that light is. Isn't that uplifting and warms the heart? Yeah.
I love her.
Now we're in the same physical situation. We're stuck in traffic with a red light. She wasn't stuck in traffic. She was enjoying the beauty of that red light.
She was totally in the moment.
The mind was allowing her to enjoy that situation, because coming back to our brainfulness is our brains think. And there's an interesting question I pose to people, and I haven't quite fathomed the answer either, but do thoughts make you think, or do you think your thoughts? And that's an interesting point. But the concept of thoughts exist, we collect them and think about them, and our brain processes them, and then we decide some action. In that red light situation, people will be saying, oh, you had negative thoughts. Thoughts don't have a polarity.
Right.
Our brain decides by processing that what our reality of that thought's going to be. So I received that thought or visual of the red traffic light. That came in as data. My brain goes, oh, dearie me, that's negative. I don't buy into concept of positive and negative, but that's another podcast.
Neither do I.
Most of us would say that's a negative, bad thing. My teacher was like, no, that's a really nice thing. Both input was the same, but the processing gave a positive or a negative answer. So the thoughts don't have polarity. You know, people say, oh, my thoughts are terrible. One, how do you own a thought? And thoughts don't have good or bad. We decide what that thought will impact us as we turn it into a physical reality. And that's how, if you can filter out thoughts or decide how to process thoughts differently to your harmonious benefit, you can overcome these dire situations a lot of people may be facing.
Yes, I really align with that. I totally agree with, not really seeing things good or bad, up or down, the universal law of polarity. Really, energy is energy, right?
Yeah,
So,
energy is a combination of positive and negative if you look at scientific kind of waveforms.
Yeah, but how we use that, as you put it, how we process that.
Hmm.
within that life situation or whatever's going on
Yeah.
is really what's going to give us the outcome that serves us best.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is
Definitely.
harmonious, as you put it, which is a perfect way of putting it, right?
Yeah. 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 Well, once you start to see thought and you appreciate it exists and you can see energy, it's a lot easier to appreciate it. But,
Hmm.
we take air for granted. We can't see air. Well,
Yes,
we all believe it's there.
right.
But for some reason, we don't think thoughts are there because we can't see them. So we don't believe it.
Yes, it's like
We
gravity.
can't see Wi-Fi. Everybody accepts their phone connects to Wi-Fi quite happily, and the internet is. And this is the point. That's all out there, and we all believe certain things without any justification whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yet there's other things like if I say, "Can you see a thought?" People go, "You're mad." Well, sorry, I can't see Wi-Fi, but I know my phone connects to Wi-Fi, and I can get the internet and send emails.
Yes.
No, I'm not sure anybody can actually see Wi-Fi. I don't know.
Yes. It's like asking someone to explain fiber optics or something. No, it's so true.
Yeah, and I think that's the point with thought, that when you build more and more thoughts and you get collective thoughts and build collective consciousness,
Mm.
there's enough people on the planet that believe Wi-Fi does exist. So we believe it exists, so we accept it. We also believe 2 + 2 is 4, so we accept that. And then there's always other things we go, I don't believe that. Well, why don't you believe that? And it's the balance to me of how many people collectively believe something that then eventually will transfer it into an acceptance that something's true.
Mm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that's another thing with thought, how you measure a thought, how big is a thought, how heavy is a thought.
I don't know.
Who knows? Because they don't exist, do they? Because they're all in your head.
Yeah. And I love how that was an interesting question that you posed. It was so like thought provoking for me. Like, do we choose our thoughts or do our thoughts just come in? Is that what you were?
Yeah. Do you think your thoughts make you think?
Oh, do you think your thoughts or do your thoughts make you think?
Think. Yeah.
Interesting. That could be a whole nother podcast. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, great. So then if we were to, in a quick recap,
Mm-hmm.
um, let's bring it home with final words, for our listeners, as far as maybe brainfulness and how that ties into, how we could really use it, for any kind of situation.
Yeah. I think it's having, if you can have an awareness that thoughts exist and also have a concept of there is a brain and a mind, wherever you think they happen to be, be conscious of that, be aware of that, think about that, because so many people say glib things and they go, "Oh, I'm open-minded," and that's meant to be a good thing. Being open-minded, that's the thing. That's a real positive, good person being open-minded. But when you think about being open-minded, you're open to a tidal wave of thoughts coming in,
Yeah.
indiscriminately flooding you with thought, and then you're drowning in thought, and your poor old brain is just going, "I can't think all that. There's too much to think. Help!" Yeah, and actually being open-minded isn't great. I prefer to be filtered minded. So once you realize thoughts are all around and you can collect whichever ones you want, and in our current situation of this sort of global virus, the collective thoughts are all thinking about the same issues, are all living around the planet. And I don't think we've ever been on this planet in our lifetime when there's been anything so significant across the whole globe.
Mm.
So the thoughts raising in our environment all have a common thread about the virus and all the connotations of what's going on. So if you're open-minded, you're just going to collect all of those thoughts in one big foul swoop and drown in all of those thoughts. Now, if all those thoughts are great for you, then brilliant, happy days. But I doubt they all are. So if you appreciate you can collect thoughts, you have to be careful which ones you collect.
Mm.
Don't be open-minded to collect everything, because there may be some thoughts actually you probably don't want to think about, that
Yeah.
aren't what you need. They don't resonate with you. They don't create harmony in your soul to make things happy. They give you problems to deal with. And your poor old brain is like, I don't want all these thoughts. And that moves you on to the next bit, is like, let go of thoughts.
Yes.
They're not to hang on to. Thoughts are there for a purpose. you can take action and create something physically in our reality. So whether that's designing a website or coming up with a podcast series, you've had the thought, you're now doing it. But if you had thought about it, thought, I must do a podcast series. I'm really thinking about doing a podcast series. And every day you're thinking, oh, wouldn't it be good if I did a podcast series? I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to think about how can I do a pod. If your brain is just processing that thought over and over and over and over and over again, your brain's going to get tired and worn out on that one thought, and it's not going to be productive.
Yeah.
And by doing that, it's preventing other thoughts coming in that are queuing up to come in
Yeah.
to deliver more goodness to your purpose. So the point with thoughts is grab thoughts, use them for what they're worth. If they're not for you and they don't make sense for you, put them back again, or do something with them, you know, or share them with somebody else, because sometimes thoughts need to collect together before they get bigger and bigger and create a big force and a big thought that actually will reach out to more and more people to create a big momentum of thought and change that more people will then pick up on, you know. So I think that's the thing. Be aware of them, use them for what they're good for. Don't hang on to them. Don't keep thinking about them. Let them go or do something with them and keep them moving through and keep them moving along. You know, it's like I always say, every drop of water in the ocean is another possibility of thought or thought of possibilities.
Yes.
But you don't want a stagnant ocean. You want it to keep
Absolutely.
flowing. You want it to keep flowing and moving and mixing and turning and
Right.
flowing. So
This is
thoughts are
what
the same. Keep them moving.
keep moving. And you know that I totally align with all of this. In Truth to Triumph, I dedicate an entire chapter that's titled "Guard Your Thoughts."
Yeah.
So I'm all about guarding my thoughts. I'm all about, sharing that,
Yeah.
concept with others. And so it seems to me that when you talk about open-mindedness,
Mm,
having an open mind as opposed to a filtered mind,
mm.
um, it kind of it kind of leads right into that guarding your thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
For
I
me,
mean,
that's the
yeah.
way, like, I do that analogy together. Does that make sense?
Well, it's very
Yeah.
similar analogy there. Yeah. I mean, I think there's probably times where, open thoughts, opening your mind to thought is great. If you're, say, doing, a brainstorming session and you want lots of great ideas, you've got to come up with, a new project and you've got a team of people together and you
Mhm.
go, right, we've got to come up with a great idea for this project. That's when you want to go, yeah, bring in all the thoughts. Have all the thoughts. Let them all whirl around and come up with a great idea. You don't want to sit there going, right, I'm not going to think about all those things. That, there are times when open-mindedness is good.
Yes. Yes.
And this is the point. You've got to be aware of all this concept, be aware of the mind is different from the brain and it has a different purpose.
Yes.
And that's where you need to sort of start going with exploring that
Yeah.
and really question the word, question the mindfulness. What does it really mean to you? And is it the brain or the mind? And my view is more brainfulness.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then that energy that you're speaking of, and stagnant waters, also reminds me of another chapter in Truth to Triumph, when I talk about when you know, you want to be in waters that are moving, right?
Mm.
Like energy
Yeah.
is constantly moving. Is if
Yeah.
you were in this stagnant pond, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
where
Yeah.
or reservoir where there's no energy going through it,
Yeah.
it's going to, you're going to have mold and mildew, and it's
Yeah.
stagnant. We
Yeah.
can't grow if
Mm.
we're in stagnant water, right?
Yeah.
Same
Yeah.
with the energy, and same with the thoughts that we allow in.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely. Definitely.
great. I love that. I love that. So, um, and then we connect that with the heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, how can we, from day to day, let's say what's going on, like if we were to put a bow around that right now, where like how everyone, I like when you were talking about how we're kind of all, we're all, I like to say anyway, that we're kind of all in the same story, so to speak, with the virus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
kind of how it affects each one of us personally is really like these little sub stories, if you will. So is that what you're saying with also the mind versus the brain, and how it's and how it relates to this current life situation, like the virus for all of us collectively, or no?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, if you're going to feed your mind that feeds your brain, you've got to choose what you dine out on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
in relation to the virus, then
precisely.
let's let it in the front door and out the back door. We don't have
So
to eat the breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right?
precisely, yeah, things happen in the world. It's good to have an awareness of our planet and we exist on it as part of life, isn't it?
Yes.
But sometimes you can drown in too much. We know the media is 24/7 and the news channels are churning 24/7 all the time. Um, it's a lot of noise, you know. And if you only tune into one news channel for an hour a day, you'll still pick up what's happening in the world, as opposed to watching every news channel all day, reading every social media post about everything all the time. You are going to drown in that one subject.
Mm.
While at the moment that's a big subject, there's still plenty of other things happening at the same time. And it's back to the sort of the balance of being aware of that, but also being aware, the planet's still moving, the planet's still spinning 24/7. It's going around. The moon rises, the sun rises, you know. And for me at the moment, yesterday I was out just in the back garden,
Mhm.
and I just stopped for that moment. I was brainful and took a little video on Twitter, and there's cows in the field. There's a couple of horses. The green is so lush. Never seen it like that. The sky is beautifully blue. There's birds singing in the trees.
Mm.
I'm thinking, I live here, but how often do I go out the back garden and stop and just take in that view for 5 minutes? Literally 5 minutes, no longer. It's not a corner phrase. Literally, it was no more than 5 minutes. Yeah.
That was the mind, right?
So I was drawn to do that, to fill my brain with, yes, I'm here in the moment and this is happening. And the rest of the world may be in chaos, but for that 5 minutes, I traveled that bit. Like I said, the mind is timeless. The brain is in reality. But I
Mind
traveled.
is timeless and the
Yeah.
brain is in reality.
Yeah.
That's
But I
amazing.
traveled somewhere else in time just to stop in this physical reality. For me, the world stopped turning. What else was going on, I detached from, and I just found that moment of calm to fill my brain with that situation. Because the
Yeah,
birds in the trees have no clue there's a virus going around and it's causing devastation around the world. It doesn't affect them. They're quite happy tweeting their song in the garden. The cows in the field, in their reality, there's not a problem.
right. Right.
So I think it's balancing between all of that. And I know it's difficult because it's a huge issue, but it's balancing between all of these issues going on in the world and all the things happening and trying to find your little point of balance, because none of us are going to change the world. None of us are powerful enough to make that huge difference to everything all the time. There's a limit to our possibility, even though possibility is infinite. We only have 24 hours a day each to do something. So, we're not all gods, are we?
Right.
But for me, that was just a moment of filling my brain. And in some ways, it did disconnect the mind and all those connections to what's going on and what's happening. I wasn't watching the television. I wasn't reading social media. I was connecting to that nature and that beauty of creation of plants and birds and trees and animals and stuff. So, it's finding that. It all comes back down to balance. It's finding that balance.
That's
You can't
beautiful.
stop thinking. Our brains will carry on thinking all the time. That's what happens.
Yeah.
But if you can balance what you allow in and balance what you do with it and then what you put out again, it
Mm.
just sort of brings some redress to the chaos that happens in everyday life. And I think reality is everyday life is full of chaos no matter what the day of the week it is. you know that's the way
Totally.
it is.
Totally.
Yeah.
I I'm so aligned with what you're saying right now because I, if there's anything I ever say is we can find those little moments of happiness, right, and love and peace and joy in no matter what the situation is. We can always find a condition in a moment to really kind of view through a different lens, if
Yeah.
you right, and really
Yeah.
see the birds, really hear the birds, really look at the cows. When you're not thinking what kind of cow it is, you're just kind of taking it in,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
We look at a tree and it's like we're
Yeah.
not looking and are we really in our brain thinking what kind of tree is that, or are we just taking like just absorbing it, the beauty
Mm.
of it, or the energy and the love that we feel from it?
Well, I think it's where we're transitioning into mind, because once you can master the brainfulness and get the brain under control to have an orderly calm
Mm-hmm.
where it's happy in the moment, and it hasn't got to start thinking about you got to go shopping tomorrow and buy some food for the cat, or whatever it is you're thinking about on the practical level, the brain can be in calm. It can focus in the moment and now. Once you can kind of get to master that, the brain then sort of has this kind of autopilot. Oh, moment now, right, bang. The brain is confident, happy where it is in the moment and now,
Yeah.
which then allows you to move nearer and through into the mind and travel into the mind, because the brain hasn't got to worry about what's going on because it's so used to that situation. It's not stressed anymore.
Right.
So it frees up the communication channel to then go through into the mind and pick up what the mind is picking up from the rest of our universe
Right. Hence
around us.
my heart mind, right? That
Yeah,
whole
yeah,
connection, that trilogy,
yeah,
if you will, right?
yeah,
Of the
yeah,
mind, heart, and
yeah,
intuition.
yeah,
Yeah, I love that.
yeah.
So, what are you working on now? Is there any particular project that you're working on now, or what's going on with you?
Juggling practically in day-to-day world, juggling lots of plates in the day-to-day world.
Amazing.
Thinking about thoughts all the time and how I can capture and pick all these ideas up together and put them down on paper.
Yeah, I
Because I've
know
got
that you're kind of,
lots of other things around, how our mind interacts with the brain and how we try
yeah,
and cope with all these
yeah,
scenarios. And
absolutely.
yeah,
Now, how can how can I support you in what you do to help others? Is there anything or that we can tell our listeners, or where people can contact you, even for any of your digital work, designing work? What would be your contacts? What would you like?
yeah. I mean, the main place to start off is on my website, which is digitalalchemist.live. That's orientated around all the sort of graphic design, web design, the sort of the day job, if you like. But all my contact details on my contact page and all the social links. So you can always find me on pretty much most of the major social media platforms, and always happy to receive a message there or connections on that level.
Amazing, amazing. This was really an honor and such an insightful conversation about creation, brainfulness, right? Mind filtering and everything else under the sun. So
Mm.
I want to thank you for joining us, and be well.
Yeah.
And here you go, Trevor Lorkings. And have a great day. Make it an amazing moment. Bye.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been really enjoyable. Thank you.